Living in Maplewood Estates should have been peaceful, but not with her in charge, Karen. She ran the HOA like a dictatorship, making up rules on the fly, fining people for leaving their porch lights on past 9 p.m., and once even trying to ban mailboxes because she thought they were an eyesore. But her latest stunt? Declaring my dog, Max, illegal. Now, Max isn't just any dog, he's a Great Dane the size of a small horse, but with the heart of a golden retriever. He wouldn't hurt a fly. But Karen, being Karen, suddenly decided that dogs over 50 pounds are a safety risk and must be removed from the neighborhood immediately. Section 12B of the HOA guidelines, she said, waving a piece of paper in my face as if it were a sacred text. Large dogs pose a threat to community peace. You have 72 hours to remove him, or I will escalate this to animal control. I laughed at first. Karen, there's no Section 12B. The HOA rules haven't changed in years. Her lips curled into a smirk. Well, I had an emergency meeting with the board. The rule is effective immediately for community safety, of course. Community safety, my butt. I knew what this was really about. Karen's tiny purse dog, Mr. Sniffles, had barked at Max one time, and instead of realizing that her dog was the problem, she declared war on mine. My neighbor, Tom, shook his head when he heard the news. Karen's gone too far this time. She went too far years ago, I grumbled. And then it hit me. If Karen could change the rules at will, so could I. I'm not getting rid of Max, I told Tom. If Karen wants a war, she's gonna get one. But how could I fight back? Filing complaints wouldn't work. Karen controlled the board. An appeal would take months, and in the meantime, she'd probably show up with animal control, grinning ear to ear as they tried to take Max away. No, I needed a strategy. Something ridiculous, something Karen could never see coming. Then Tom, ever the joker, blurted out, "What if Max ran for HOA president?" We both laughed. Then we stopped. And then we really thought about it. Wait a minute, I said slowly. Why can't he? Karen's own rules didn't say that the HOA president had to be human. And as luck would have it, the next HOA election was coming up in 2 months. I grinned down at Max, scratching behind his ears. How do you feel about politics, buddy? Max responded with a loud, happy woof. Oh, it was on. If there was one thing I knew for certain, it was this: Karen was going to lose her mind. Tom and I spent the next few days digging through the HOA bylaws, and sure enough, there was nothing that explicitly said the HOA president had to be a human. The rules only stated that any resident in good standing may run for election. Max had lived here for 3 years. Never missed a payment. Never caused damage to any property. By all definitions, he was a resident in good standing. Now came the fun part, launching his campaign. Step 1. Get the neighborhood on board. Our first move was winning over the other homeowners, which, thankfully, wasn't too difficult. Everyone hated Karen. She fined Old Man Jenkins for having an unauthorized garden gnome. She forced Maria to repaint her door because beige was too aggressive. She banned kids' lemonade stands because they were unregulated commerce. Karen had been an HOA dictator for too long, and people were desperate for change. So when I announced that Max was running, they loved it. Honestly, I'd vote for a literal pile of bricks if it meant getting rid of Karen, Jenkins grumbled. At least Max won't fine me for leaving my trash can out for an extra 10 minutes, Maria said. We should make t-shirts, Tom suggested. Step 2. Campaign materials. No campaign is complete without signs, buttons, and slogans. Tom, a graphic design hobbyist, whipped up some campaign materials. Soon, the entire neighborhood was covered with signs that read, "Max for HOA president because he's a good boy. A leader who won't be ITE unlike Karen. Karen has had her DAYIT's time for Max to lead the way." We printed t-shirts, buttons, and even a giant campaign banner that we hung in front of my house. Max's adorable face, complete with a little tie, was plastered everywhere. The best part? Karen didn't even know yet. Step 3. The announcement. Once everything was ready, I made sure Karen would hear the news in the most dramatic way possible. She held an HOA meeting every month, and this time, the room was packed. More people than usual had shown up, probably because word had spread fast that something big was happening. Karen stood at the front, smug as ever. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone about the new rule regarding oversized dogs. I stood up. Actually, Karen, I have an announcement. She scowled. This is not an open forum, Kyle. Oh, I think everyone will want to hear this. I turned to face the crowd. I'm officially nominating Max for HOA president. Silence. Then laughter. Then cheering. Karen's face turned purple. You can't be serious. I held up the bylaws. Actually, the rules say any resident in good standing can run. Max meets all the requirements. And judging by how many people here hate your guts, I'd say he has a pretty good shot. More cheers. People were clapping. Karen's mouth flapped open like a dying fish. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Tom echoed. You made up a rule banning big dogs. What's more ridiculous, banning someone's pet or letting a good boy fix this mess of an HOA? Karen looked around, realizing she was losing the room. People were nodding, murmuring in agreement. She slammed her hands on the table. Fine. If you want to make a joke of this HOA, go ahead. But I will fight this. I just smiled. Good luck with that. Max let out a loud, proud woof. The campaign had officially begun. Karen had no idea what she was up against. She thought this was just a joke, a silly stunt that would fade away in a few days. But she underestimated one thing. People really, really hated her. And Max? Everyone loved Max. Step 1. The debates. Karen tried to shut down the election multiple times, but every time she screamed about HOA integrity or respect for the rules. I calmly pointed out that she was the one who changed the rules at will. So she had no choice but to accept that Max was an official candidate. Then came the best part, the HOA presidential debate. Karen insisted on having one, probably thinking she could humiliate us. Well, that backfired spectacularly. The community center was packed. People brought snacks. Someone even set up a popcorn machine. It was standing room only. Karen, dressed in her usual beige power suit, stepped up to the podium. Thank you all for coming. Let's be serious for a moment. Do we really want to put an animal in charge of our community? I smiled and stepped up beside Max, who sat next to me wearing a little bow tie. Well, Karen, let's consider your track record. You ban porch swings because they look too casual. You fine someone for having too many flowers in their yard. You tried to ban barbecues because the smell was distracting. So, yeah, I think a dog might actually do a better job. Laughter. Cheers. Applause. Karen's eye twitched. She turned to Max. Does your candidate have anything to say? Max, right on cue, pressed a button on a soundboard we had hidden behind the podium. A pre-recorded voice played. Max supports lower HOA fees and more freedom for homeowners. The crowd lost it. People were crying, laughing. Karen's face went red. This is absurd. Tom stood up. Absurd? I don't know, Karen. Max is polite, listens to the people, and doesn't hand out random fines for breathing too loud. Seems like a better candidate than you. The debate ended with a standing ovation for Max. Karen stormed out, fuming. Step 2. The scandal. Realizing she was losing hard, Karen did what Karen does best, tried to cheat. One morning, I woke up to find a pamphlet on my doorstep. It had a poorly photoshopped image of Max growling with the words, "Danger. This dog cannot be trusted." Below it, in tiny letters, Max has been seen chasing squirrels. What happens when he starts chasing children? Do we really want this menace in charge? I burst out laughing. She was really out here running a smear campaign against a dog. Tom called me, barely able to speak through his wheezing laughter. Bro, did you see it? She made a fake attack out on Max. The rest of the neighborhood? Not impressed. Maria posted in the HOA Facebook group. Karen has officially lost it. We all know Max is a sweetheart. I'd rather trust him than her any day. Even old man Jenkins, who had been neutral until now, chimed in. Max doesn't knock on my door at 7 a.m. to complain about my fence. He's got my vote. Karen's plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of turning people against Max, she made herself look even crazier. Step 3. The final polls. With only 1 week left until the election, we held a final town poll to see where things stood. Karen, 17%. Max, 83%. I don't think I've ever seen Karen look more horrified in her life. Tom clapped me on the back. Dude, it's happening. We're actually gonna make a dog HOA president. I looked down at Max, who was happily wagging his tail. Ready to win this, buddy? Max let out a confident woof. It was time for the final showdown. Karen was desperate. The polls showed Max was crushing her, the neighborhood was fully behind him, and her smear campaign had blown up in her face. She only had 1 week left before the election, and if there was one thing we knew about Karen, it was that she never played fair. So when she showed up on my doorstep with 2 animal control officers, I wasn't even surprised. Karen's dirty trick. Mr. Kyle, Karen sneered, arms crossed, it has come to my attention that your candidate is actually a public menace. The 2 officers looked uncomfortable, like they knew they were about to be dragged into some nonsense. We received an anonymous complaint that your dog is aggressive and unregistered, one officer said. Anonymous. I snorted. Karen, you literally made a fake campaign flyer calling him a menace. You're not even trying to hide it at this point. Karen gasped. How dare you accuse me of? I ignored her and turned to the officers. Max is a fully registered emotional support animal. I have his vaccination records, and he's never been aggressive a day in his life. I handed over Max's paperwork, which I already had ready because I knew Karen was going to pull some cartoon villain nonsense. One officer looked over the documents and nodded. Everything's in order here. Karen screeched. But he's a danger to the community. Max, on cue, sat politely and gave the officer a gentle high five. The officer chuckled. Ma'am, this is the calmest dog I've ever seen. Karen was seething. Her face turned a shade of red I didn't even know was humanly possible. You'll regret this, she spat before stomping away like an angry toddler. I patted Max's head. Nice work, Mr. President. Max whiffed an agreement. Election Day, the fall of Karen. The HOA election was held in the community center, and for the first time in HOA history, nearly every homeowner showed up to vote. Karen sat at her usual table, trying to look confident, but everyone could tell she was sweating bullets. The HOA secretary, an older woman named Gladys, stood up to announce the results. After counting all the votes, the next HOA president of Maplewood Estates is. She paused for dramatic effect. Max, the dog. The room erupted into cheers. People were clapping, laughing, and high-fiving. Karen? Silent. Completely, utterly, devastatingly silent. Then she stood up so fast her chair toppled over. This is a disgrace. You can't be serious. Gladys adjusted her glasses. Actually, Karen, the votes are final. Max won by a landslide, 97% to 3%. Who voted for me? Karen screeched. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a single voice. I think you voted for yourself, Karen. The entire room burst into laughter. Karen's face twisted into pure rage. I won't accept this. Actually, Gladys cut in. Max has officially been sworn in as HOA president. And as his first executive order, he has officially fired you from the board. The crowd went insane. People were cheering. Some were actually crying tears of joy. Karen? Done. Completely, utterly, absolutely done. She let out an ear-piercing scream, grabbed her giant purse, and stormed out of the community center. Max, sitting beside me, simply let out a victorious woof. It was over. Or, so we thought. Because as Karen disappeared into the night, she muttered something under her breath. This isn't over. I'll be back. And I had a feeling that meant trouble. Karen was humiliated. She had spent years terrorizing the neighborhood, treating the HOA like her personal kingdom. And now, she had been defeated by a dog in a bow tie. But if we thought she was going to go quietly, we were dead wrong. Karen's revenge plan. For 2 weeks, the neighborhood was peaceful. People were happier than ever. Max, in his role as HOA president, had already implemented major reforms. All dog-related rules? Gone. No more ridiculous fines for offensive flower colors. A brand new community barbecue event was scheduled. Morale was at an all-time high. That's when Karen struck back. One morning, I woke up to find a foreclosure notice taped to my front door. I blinked. What the? Tom, who had just stepped outside, saw me holding the paper. Dude, what did Karen do this time? The notice claimed I had violated multiple HOA rules, resulting in thousands of dollars in fines. Since I hadn't paid, my house was being put up for foreclosure. Karen's signature was all over it. But here's the thing, Karen wasn't the HOA president anymore. Max was. The emergency meeting. I stormed into the community center, foreclosure notice in hand, where the HOA board was already meeting. Karen was there, smirking like a villain from a bad soap opera. You can't just make up rules, Karen, I snapped, slamming the notice on the table. Oh, but I can, she purred. You see, I've been vice president of the HOA for years. And according to a very specific bylaw, if the president is incapable of performing their duties, the vice president regains control. I narrowed my eyes. And what exactly makes Max incapable? Karen grinned. He's a dog, Kyle. A dog. He can't sign paperwork. He can't make official rulings. Which means his presidency is invalid. The room fell silent. And for one terrible second, I thought she had actually won. But then, Max stood up on his hind legs, walked to the table, and pressed his paw onto an ink pad I had secretly brought with me. Then, with the grace of a true leader, he slammed his paw print onto the official HOA documents. Gasps filled the room. Gladys, the HOA secretary, adjusted her glasses. Well, technically, there's nothing in the bylaws saying the president must have a human signature. Tom leaned forward, grinning. That looks like an official signature to me. Karen's smirk dropped. What? You can't THIS's. I held up a hand. Karen, per the new HOA policy, we now have a 3-strike rule for abuse of power. I pulled out 3 separate violations that Karen had committed in the past week. Keycap 1, attempting to illegally fine multiple residents. Keycap 2, trying to forge foreclosure documents. Keycap 3, trespassing on private property to plant fake evidence against Max. Gladys stamped each one. Karen's eyes widened in pure horror. Per the HOA rules, Gladys said, you are hereby banned from serving on the board. Permanently. The room exploded into cheers. Karen? Absolutely defeated. She let out a high-pitched shriek, grabbed her purse, and stormed out for the final time. The neighborhood was finally free. Victory and celebration. That weekend, we held the biggest community barbecue in HOA history. People laughed, ate, and celebrated. Max, wearing his official HOA president sash, sat at the head of the event, basking in the attention. Tom raised a glass. To Max, the best HOA president we've ever had. The crowd roared in agreement. As for Karen, she moved out a month later. No one was sad to see her go. And just like that, Maplewood Estates became a paradise. All thanks to a very good boy. Like and subscribe for more video like this.